Hello and welcome to Journalist Hangout UK, the show where we discuss issues both African and worldwide which are affecting the continent. And we look at how those issues are seen at home and in the African diaspora. I'm Lanre Akinola and I'm pleased to welcome our panel. Priscilla Nwikpo, Public Affairs Analyst, James Omotola, writer and actor, and Vuyiswa Ngqobongwana, broadcaster. Welcome to the show, everybody. Before we get into today's discussion, quick summary of the week. We've had some tragic news out of Mozambique this week. 17 people killed in a rubbish dump collapse in the capital, Maputo, serving as a reminder of Africa's urbanization challenge. Very worrying news coming out of northern Nigeria as well. It looks like Boko Haram have seized more schoolgirls, something that will be reminiscent of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign that has been ongoing for several years. There's conflicting reports about how many have been seized and how many have been rescued. And finally, and on a slightly more cheerful note, Sub-Saharan Africa has been making headlines at the Winter Olympics. They haven't been winning any medals, but at least they have been representing Africa with a great sense of pride out in South Korea. But on to our first topic of the day. We are going to be looking at Ethiopia. Now, we all know that things are changing and they seem to be changing quite rapidly out there. Just over a week ago, the Prime Minister, Haile Mariam Desalegn, announced that he was resigning. Since then, we have seen mass protests. We have seen thousands of political prisoners released. We've seen a new state of emergency declared in the country. Very quickly, from each of you, your top line, sort of 15, 20 seconds. What's it all about? James, I know you like to go by Omo. I'll start with you. Omo, what is your top line on Ethiopia? Are we looking at a palace coup here? Is this just internal politics, or are we looking at real change?
Well, Ethiopia has always been in the news, for persistent drought issues, and since that has been drastically, eradicated through the weather index crop insurance, it seems they've instantly replaced it with political chaos. I can't understand why the same problem persists, because it's not the first time this is happening in Ethiopia. It's just heightened more because of the abrupt resignation of Maria.
Is it real change or is it superficial?
Well, I can't see the change. It's a bit worrying.
Okay.
I hope it turns to a good change.
Vuyiswa, what's your take?
I think it's a control mechanism. I don't think I'm being too cynical in saying that, because Ethiopia is seen as the beacon of model of good democracy, shall we say. It's certainly doing well economically. So it would be a contradiction to do so well economically and be run by a dictator. So they've taken off the control, they've increase the control mechanisms by looking like they've taken them off, by releasing 3,000 people systematically in January, and now he resigns, not clear why. It just seems like a mechanism for them to breathe and reorganize to create an environment where it looks like we can have a democratic election.
Priscilla?
I think it's very important what is happening in Ethiopia right now, where Africa is concerned. We've been seeing a lot of changes recently happening on the continent, but I think that the Ethiopian brand of change at the moment that we're seeing, especially with the announced resignation and the reasons for the resignation.
I don't buy them.
I think it's very important for the continent, and we are going to see real change.
All right, so Priscilla, you're the most optimistic on the panel so far. I just throwing my 2 cents. I happen to think that this is symptomatic of more meaningful change. The Prime Minister said when he resigned that he wanted to pave the way to a democratic transition. Some divided opinions on that.
But they've been under pressure to do that, so they have to give way somehow. But the military force surrounding that individual aren't going to give way too much. But they've given away just enough for people to say, hey, there's hope. But I hope the civil society organizations can keep pushing them further.
I think it's important to see Ethiopia appearing to take note of the cries of Ethiopians.
Yes.
This has been going on for some time now. It's not the first time there's a state of emergency, in Ethiopia. We had it last year. We're back on it again this year. But I think what is more important about it and what is so crucial is the fact that this year we've had a step down from a sitting prime minister as a result of the protests. And the fact that, the risk that Ethiopia cannot afford at the moment is to have this to continue, because Ethiopia has developed developed so well economically. They are making strides, they're making headway, and they cannot afford not to have a country that is divided, to have a country that is riotous. You know, the stability of Ethiopia is very important at this moment. Thus, I think it's a good thing, and it's important for the rest of Africa.
Omar?
Well, I think for the stability to continue, the core problem has to be looked at. The main problem with Ethiopia over the years has always been the disproportionate economic and diplomatic power held
the country
by the minority, by the Tigrayans.
Yes.
They are just 5% of the population. It's about 5 million people in a population of about 100 million. And you have the majority, the Oromo people, and you have the Amaras, it's about 25 million, and the southern Ethiopian movement as well. They are nowhere to be seen in the office of governance. They were given, there's a coalition government in Ethiopia, but this coalition is systematically marginalized. It's the Tigrayans who hold the influential economic security positions.
Yes.
So they determine and decide where Ethiopia goes.
Yeah.
So this is the main problem of Ethiopia, and it will continue unless they change that particular issue.
Well, you see, the thing is, Ethiopia, as a federation, as it is, their constitution does allow the devolvement of power. Unfortunately, as it is written, it is not demonstrated physically. But I think that we're at a point now where it is no longer tenable for them to continue to ignore the constitutional instrument that demands for power to be devolved. It's a classic case that it's right across Africa where we see this ethnic uprising, where a dominating tribe or a non-dominating tribe is dominating the dominant tribe. And we're seeing this right across Africa, and there is this tussle of we must also be acknowledged and we must also be a part. And I believe Ethiopia is going to make the right choice at the end of the day for this.
Yes.
Vuyiswa, you called it a control mechanism. Now, there's a
on
lot
the part of the government.
There's a lot of pressure on the government. Is there not a risk that they can't just turn around overnight and completely change the system? It has to be controlled, right?
Of course, there has to be a controlled evolution movement, but obviously they're going to be slower in their movement. And the Oromo majority who've been crying out to the world, and the world is listening, now that pressure is feeding back. So it's just a question of who's moving who on the chessboard. And the people, the voice of the people is what's moved this government to take the actions that they have. And I hope, and I'm optimistic, that a more Ethiopian national identity can come out of this whole process.
Well, the Ethiopians, having been out there a few times, I don't know whether you've had the pleasure, and it is a pleasure to go out to Ethiopia. They're very proud people. So I certainly would not underestimate them. But just some numbers here. The government has released 6,000 political prisoners since the beginning of the year. Now, in any country, that has to be significant. I can't think of anywhere else where you've had such a high-profile prisoner release in such numbers. Surely this is indicative that the government is quite serious about trying to bridge the gap here.
I think this demonstrates what we have seen with Ethiopia in recent times, in that Ethiopia, the government officials and individuals that hold specific positions within the government, they've made up their mind that they're going to not only develop Ethiopia, but change the direction and the destiny of Ethiopia. From that country that we all saw once upon a time, affected by famine, to a country that is, at the helm of affairs in Africa. And so as a result of that, they've individually made personal choices. Thus, we see this release of 6,000 prisoners. That is to say, yes, we are making headway. We want to be able to ensure that Ethiopia is all-inclusive for all Ethiopians, and not necessarily just for, as Omo mentioned earlier, the stronger, minority tribe that holds power. It's not about that. I believe Ethiopia is working strongly to do this.
Before you come in, and just to add this, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. There's talk that the new Prime Minister could be an Oromo. So we're looking at some names that have been thrown into mix. Abiy Ahmed, who's a senior figure in the Oromo People's Democratic Organization. Lemon Margesa is another name that is being thrown around. That sounds like a pretty big step to go from a minority-dominated government to an Oromo as the new prime minister.
Yeah, well, it was actually supposed to be Lema Magesa, because he was the president of the Oromo regional government.
OPTDO,
but he is not a member of the national parliament. And you have to be a member of the national parliament to be considered for the post of the prime minister. So they have to appoint his deputy, who is Abiy Ahmed. But coming to your point earlier, that the significance of the 6,000 people, I have to respectfully disagree with you, because releasing 6,000 people should have been, you know, sort of a good news for the protesters to feel, okay, oh, thank you. But you have to remember that just about 2 years ago, hundreds of protesters were shot at and killed, and about 30,000 people were imprisoned. So for the government to release 6,000 people out of about 30,000 prisoners, it's like, hey, we're not a fool here.
Yes.
There's still many more in prison.
But it's a step towards the right direction, surely.
This is within the space of a few weeks, though. I mean, let's see what happened. Just last night, they released another 1,500 from the eastern Somali region as well.
Yeah, but we're meant to believe that the reason the prime minister resigned is mainly because the prisoners were released to his, you know, annoyance, because he probably didn't approve it or whatever. But I believe there's ulterior motives behind his resignation.
Well, that's why I come back to the first phrase I used: control mechanism, carefully designed to create an impression. Okay, we can see through that, but that doesn't mean that there isn't progress happening. So it's a good thing. And for Ethiopian people, it's an expression or a chance to get their expression out, because one thing that I noticed is how free is the Ethiopian press. How free is the individual Ethiopian to stand up on a street corner and say exactly what they think? And that's the acid test.
Okay, we unfortunately have to break. This is obviously a big topic. There's a lot more to be said about it. It will take time. There's no doubt there's a very long and difficult road ahead. I, for one, am rooting for the Ethiopian people and very much hope they can make it happen.
Absolutely.
Hopefully.
The only part of Africa that never got colonized.
We'll take a quick break now. We have plenty more to discuss, so please join us in a few moments. Hello and welcome back to Journalist Hangout UK. I'm Lanre, Akinola, and I'm pleased to welcome back our panel, Priscilla and Nwikpo, James Omotola, and Vuyiswa Ngqobongwana. Now, unless you've been living under a rock for the last few weeks, you will know that a certain superhero movie called Black Panther is making headlines beyond belief globally. It's also making money beyond belief globally. It's already one of the highest grossing movies ever made. It is the first big budget, high profile superhero movie that could legitimately be called an African movie, an African story. Omo, you are dressed appropriately for the occasion. You are our ambassador from Wakanda for the day. Could you get us started on this one? Does this mark a turning point for Africa on the global stage? How significant is this movie? It's obviously doing very well, but is there a deeper significance here?
This is massive. This is a topic I am passionately sensitized to. I have been involved with various projects promoting Africa for the last few years. I made a documentary highlighting the good things about Nigeria that people don't talk about. I wrote, a program, for TV, which, highlights all the major developments in Africa, and also another program which profiles, African individuals who have contributed enormously to the development and growth of Africa. But all these things put together and similar projects of the same purpose, they are nowhere near what the impact this movie is having across the globe. Asia to Europe to Australia to the Americas. Africa is on the lips of everybody in a positive light, without talking about genocide, corruption, and You know, and this, I couldn't be prouder as an African of a Nigerian origin. I'm excited.
A true citizen of Wakanda.
Yes.
Priscilla, your take.
Do you know what? I actually watched it last night and I loved it. I loved it. What I particularly loved about this film, I loved it from beginning to end. There was all the cultural nuances. I thought they were fantastic. And I have to say, the one-liners were just some of the best one-liners. And it didn't come from one character. It came literally from all of them at different, the timing was on point. And as for my heroes, the women, the warriors, oh my goodness. I mean, when a movie depicts women, it was so good to see a film that did not in any way sexualize women, that didn't depict women as the lowest sex and all of that. But it just, they were sexy, they were my sexy warriors. I love the way they were depicted. But I think more importantly is the truths that ran through the film. It was so bold. It was in your face. And you know, I sat there and I was in awe. I thought, wow. You know, I mean, it's not that it's hidden. It's in the public domain, I know. But this movie just slaps you with some of the truths, and you can't avoid it. You can't ignore it. And then the quality was fabulous. It was on point. I loved, I mean, I could go on.
I can tell.
So I'm going to be kind.
Vuyiswa, I imagine you're not going to disagree with what you're hearing.
Absolutely not. I think like many people watching, I haven't yet seen it, but I've just heard the best promotion for it. I can't wait to see it.
You need to see it.
Anything that highlights African people in a positive light based on our own reality with some control of the production mechanism. We may not have control of the means of production, but we're having some control within the mechanism.
One of the things that a friend pointed out to me yesterday, which I must agree with, is like you've said, it's making so much money. Somebody sat down and just thought, do you know something? They saw the numbers before, because $200 million was committed to making this movie.
Yeah.
But my goodness, they're tripping.
It made that in the opening weekend in the US.
So somebody sat down and realized the numbers.
But Hollywood is pretty much
right.
attuned to making cartoons come to life before this one. So they knew that was going to be a success. Yes. When you go into the realm of what you are defining as fantasy, obviously utilizing reality to convey it, it's a safe arena to tackle the juicy issues that you may not feel confident enough to just put out on normal mainstream TV. So I think it's a great educational tool.
And the good thing about the movie is you can't just simply classify it as a superhero.
Yeah.
It's action movie, it's sci-fi, it's got romance, it's big budget, 200 million.
Yes.
It's made 400 million within a week.
Yeah.
It makes Terminator looks like a child's play. Seriously.
Yes.
If you see the superhero in the movie, you would think Terminator is a child's play.
Yes.
This is a movie that got me wound up. I just can't control myself. I feel like a kid in a sweet show when I watch this.
It's been a long time coming. The last time we had a global hit like this that really profiled Africa at a global level was Coming to America,
Yes.
Eddie Murphy's
which
classic.
I still love till tomorrow.
Yes.
But why has it taken so long between then and now, and why is this time different? Are we going to have to wait another 30 years, or could this really be the beginning of a new trend in terms of Africa as part of just mainstream culture, mainstream
To
entertainment?
be honest with you, Lanre, I couldn't be bothered. I'm full of praise for Hollywood, seriously, that they've given Africa this medium. And we have to seize on this momentum. We have to take it from here and not let this just be a one-off.
Absolutely.
We have to seize on this momentum and make use of it. This is African story with Africans playing the lead roles. It's a complete success. We have to make sure that, because with this movie, the way I see it, the legacy this movie is going to leave is probably going to be very hard to follow. But we can make it simple to follow by investing more in African stories through the same channel.
I think, you know, in answer to your question, Lanre, the movie does a lot of things. It's a pity that it took 30 years for us to have to arrive at this point. But I think that globally we're in an era of truth, is what I call it now, where we are, whether or not we like it, we appreciate it, we're having to discuss some uncomfortable truths that, you know, we've either swept under the carpet or pretended wasn't there. So for that, I think it's the timing is perfection to have this out in that regard. But then what it also does is that for a generation that have only, I recall when I first came to the United Kingdom as a child, I saw the images of Ethiopia, and I recall my fellow black children said to me, you must, you know, I must obviously come from a place that looked like that. And I wasn't familiar with that scene of Ethiopia. And when I had to explain to them that actually I've never seen that type. So it's good for a generation.
So one of the key issues we're talking about here, Vuyiswa, and I'd love to get your perspective, is perception of Africa.
Yes.
This movie is doing a great job at changing perceptions of Africa. How do we seize that momentum and build on that?
Get hold of the means of production one way or another and inspire investors who are waiting for ideas that are good enough to invest in. And thank God for the internet. Now we have the mechanisms to communicate with each other. So this is a wonderful platform. Okay, there are some people who will never be satisfied that it didn't solve all the problems, but it's a beginning. Yes. And I really praise anything that highlights us in a positive way. And particularly like Priscilla was saying, women, strong African women, the foundation of the world, for goodness sake. So if we can come up with ideas good enough, that's the challenge for us.
Well, I don't think it's if we can come up with ideas good enough, because I think the good enough ideas have been there. I think maybe they'll be more welcomed now and more appreciated, as opposed to sort of pushing it aside, because, you know, once upon a time they didn't think making movies like this will make as much money.
Yes.
But today I think we get it now, having seen this. There is no formal advert, you do realize that, you know, we haven't had billboard posters plastered all over the place with Black Panther, and you haven't, you know, it's not the usual, but through the internet, we're all aware of it.
Could it also be a bit of a wake-up call for African leaders to emulate what is being shown on screen? Because we don't have Wakanda yet. Yeah. We could have it, but, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Should we be playing this at the African Union and in, you know, state houses across the continent? Like, look, guys, you need to get a move on here.
You know, in your classic, you know, superhero film, you usually see the good versus the bad. It's usually that. We don't, it's not, Black Panther is not about the good guy and the bad guy per se. It's more about, how do I describe this? A narrative that has been hidden to an extent, and it challenges everybody. It challenges the African leaders, you know, because the king, you know, the king is challenged, torn between good or bad, as it were, making the right decision and being extremely angry about something his father did. So it challenges and you know, torn also equally between how do I continue my leadership? Do I maintain the old ways of doing things, or do I come to the 21st century where we're at and share that? So
sorry.
No, please. I'm getting carried away.
You've got a lot of passion.
I know. I'm getting carried away.
Got to get it out.
Let me let you in, please.
It's just to add to what you said earlier, that what could African leaders do? Well, for me, I think the only thing they can do is to seize on this momentum by getting involved in entertainment development. We can't, this has been going on for years. Nollywood are doing fantastically well by themselves. The government needs to get more involved. The Nigerian Culture and Information Minister, Mr. Lai Mohammed, Uncle, if you're watching, please.
Yes.
And it can liaise. It can liaise with the South African partners, Ghanaian partners. They can come together. They know the investors that can put 200 million on the table. We have all the creativity, we have the creative minds, we have the stories that can interest the Western audience. We can do it. It's done already. 200 million's made over 400 million in a week. So we can do it. The government needs to help.
We have very unfortunately run out of time, but I have to thank the ambassador from Wakanda for that. inspirational last word.
But you know that
I think
this
you
is
speak-
not unusual for Africans.
I think you speak for all of us in your sentiment. Now, I have to admit I haven't seen it yet, but I need to sort myself
You
out.
need to
Yes,
go
you have
see
to go and
this.
see it.
You can't continue
Me
not
too.
seeing it.
I will. We'll get on it. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
So
We'll
there's not
get
seen
on
it versus the seen it.
Absolutely.
Don't forget to follow us at RealJH UK on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm Lanre Akinola, and from the entire team in London, goodbye, and thank you for watching Journalist Hangout UK.